outsider child. They thought he was strange. They thought he didn't belong. But what no one saw was that the boy staring out his bedroom window was already looking at another planet. In the mid-1970s in Pretoria, South Africa, a small boy sat on the floor of his room, surrounded not by toys, but by books. Towers of science fiction novels leaned against the wall, pages yellowed by the African sun. At school, he was mocked for the way he spoke, for the way he drifted away into thought mid-conversation. His classmates didn't see a dreamer. They saw a target. Elon Musk was that boy, small for his age, painfully shy, and marked by the heavy silence of a broken home. His parents had divorced early, leaving him to live with a father whose presence would later be described in words few sons ever dare to use: cold, cruel, unbearable. In that suffocating environment, books became his lifeline. He devoured entire encyclopedias, memorized passages of science fiction, and taught himself to code on a primitive computer long before personal computers became common. But none of that mattered in the schoolyard. Out there, knowledge was not admired. It was punished. One afternoon, walking home with his head buried in a book, Elon was cornered. A group of older boys pushed him to the ground, fists striking, kicks landing, his face hit the pavement. The world blurred. He would later need surgery for the damage to his nose. For weeks, he barely spoke. He retreated further inward, deeper into the silent worlds he built in his mind. But here's the twist. What broke most children only hardened Elon. The abuse didn't kill his imagination. It sharpened it. It gave him a reason to escape. Not just from Pretoria, not just from South Africa, but from Earth itself. Night after night, he would lie awake staring at the stars. Other kids saw distant lights. Elon saw destinations. He imagined rockets carrying him away from the bullies, away from the cruelty of his father, away from a world that never seemed to fit him. What the world didn't know then was that this boy, bruised and bloody, was already plotting his escape. And it would not be to another city or another country. It would be to another world. The boy no one wanted to sit next to in class would one day build machines to carry humanity beyond its cradle. But first, he had to survive. First, he had to leave. And when the moment came, he didn't just leave home. He ran, as if the future of the human race depended on it. Every dreamer eventually faces a choice. Stay where the world has already decided who you are, or run and risk everything for the chance to become someone else. Elon Musk was 17 when the walls of South Africa began to feel like a prison. Apartheid was still the dark shadow over the nation, and he knew if he stayed, he would be drafted into a military system built to defend it. He wanted no part of that. But there was more. Elon's mind was already fixed on something larger, something far beyond the borders of Pretoria. He wanted freedom. He wanted opportunity. He wanted to be where ideas mattered more than fists, where imagination was currency. And to him, that place had a name, America. But America was far away, almost unreachable. He had no powerful relatives there, no golden ticket. What he did have was a Canadian-born mother, May Musk, who gave him a pathway to Canada, a stepping stone. The choice was brutal. Leave everything behind. Friends, family, safety, or risk being trapped forever in a place that could never contain his vision. At 17, Elon packed a small suitcase, carrying little more than clothes, a few books, and an address scribbled on paper. It belonged to relatives he had never even met. He boarded a plane, heart pounding, with a one-way ticket to an unknown life. Canada was not the dream he expected. It was harsh, cold, and lonely. He arrived with almost nothing, slept on couches, worked menial jobs, cutting wood, cleaning boilers, shoveling dirt. The genius who had memorized encyclopedias back in South Africa now struggled to afford food. But Elon wasn't afraid of struggle. He was afraid of stagnation. Every dollar he scraped together went to his education. He enrolled at Queen's University in Ontario, walking across campus with second-hand clothes, invisible among wealthier students. Yet, beneath the surface, the fire was burning. He was already plotting his next escape, this time to the United States. 2 years later, he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. America at last. But it wasn't a land of ease he had imagined. He rented a rundown house with his brother Kimball. To survive, they turned it into a makeshift nightclub, charging students $5 at the door, squeezing 100 people into the living room. Elon, socially awkward and lost in his own thoughts, rarely joined the party. Instead, he stayed in his room, coding late into the night, his mind on the future. His classmates dreamed of Wall Street, law firms, or comfortable lives. Elon dreamed of three things: the internet, renewable energy, and space. It was an audacious list, almost insane for a young man with student debt and no connections. But Elon believed that these were not just business ideas. They were humanity's destiny. Yet destiny doesn't wait politely. It demands risk. And so, in the mid-1990s, with Silicon Valley calling, Elon packed his few belongings once again and moved west. There, he founded his first startup, Zip2, an online city guide. It was the dawn of the internet age, and Elon was at the right place at the right time. Except he wasn't the boss. Not really. Investors doubted his ability to lead. They thought he was too intense, too reckless, too unpolished. He worked 20 hours a day, often sleeping under his desk, showering at the YMCA. But still, they pushed him aside, replacing him as CEO. Zip2 sold for over $300 million. Elon made his first fortune, but the way it happened left a scar. He had been sidelined in his own company, treated as expendable. This was his first great lesson in America. You can win and still lose. Still, money gave him new fuel. He reinvested, created X.com, which would later become PayPal. But again, the pattern repeated. The board didn't trust him. He was ousted as CEO while on vacation. By then, Elon Musk was worth tens of millions. On the outside, he was a success story. On the inside, he was restless, angry, unsatisfied. He hadn't crossed oceans, left behind everything, and endured humiliation just to build small companies and be forgotten. His vision was bigger, much bigger, because the boy who once looked at the stars from his bedroom in Pretoria still saw them calling. And in his mind, there was only one true escape left. Not from South Africa, not from Canada, not even from the corporate politics of Silicon Valley. No, his escape would be from Earth itself. The fall. Money can buy you comfort, but it cannot buy you peace. And for Elon Musk, fortune was never the destination, only fuel for the next war. By the early 2000s, Elon Musk should have been satisfied. He had done what most immigrants only dream about. Founded a startup, sold it for millions, and then built another, PayPal, that reshaped online commerce. When eBay bought PayPal for $1.5 billion, Elon walked away with a fortune of $180 million. To the outside world, he was set for life. To Elon, life was just beginning. He had enough money now to buy mansions, cars, luxury. And for a moment, he did. He purchased a McLaren F1 supercar, one of the fastest in the world, and wrecked in a crash uninsured. Reporters loved the story of the eccentric young millionaire. But behind the headlines, Elon fell hollow. He hadn't come this far for status symbols. His childhood dream was still burning. Rockets, planets, Mars. And that was where the fall began. When he poured his fortune into Tesla and SpaceX, most people thought he was insane. The automotive industry was a graveyard for startups. Every attempt at building a new car company in the past 50 years had failed. And private space exploration, that was something only governments could afford. No sane investor would follow him. But Elon didn't care about sanity. He cared about possibility. Tesla was supposed to prove that electric cars could be sexy, powerful, and viable. SpaceX was supposed to break the monopoly of government and push humanity toward the stars. Both missions demanded everything he had. And so, he poured almost all his PayPal fortune into these two fragile, desperate ventures. It was a gamble of historic proportions. By 2007, that gamble looked like suicide. SpaceX launched its first rocket, Falcon 1. From a tiny island in the Pacific, the world watched. Elon's money, his reputation, his very dream. Everything was on the line. And then, failure. The The rocket exploded before reaching orbit. Months later, they tried again. Failure. A third time. Failure. 3 times in a row. The sky rejected him. Each rocket cost millions. Each failure pushed SpaceX closer to death. And it wasn't just SpaceX. At the same time, Tesla was hemorrhaging money. The prototype Roadster was years late, plagued with problems, and investors were losing faith. Elon was forced to borrow money to pay rent. Even as the media mocked him, tech boy genius burning cash. One headline read, the narrative shifted. Elon Musk was no longer a visionary. He was a reckless gambler, throwing away his fortune on impossible dreams. At home, the pressure was unbearable. Elon's marriage to Justine Musk, the woman he had met back in college, was collapsing. The couple had endured the unimaginable, the loss of their first child to sudden infant death syndrome. They went on to have twins and triplets, but grief had carved a canyon between them. Arguments replaced tenderness. Resentment replaced hope. Elon's empire was crumbling. His family was fracturing. His reputation was sinking. This was the fall. And yet, here is the paradox of Elon Musk. Failure did not silence him. It fueled him. The more the world declared him finished, the more he burned inside. By the end of 2008, he was nearly broke. His fortune was gone. His companies were on the brink of collapse. His marriage had ended. His friends advised him to give up, cut his losses, live comfortably on what little he had left. But Elon Musk refused. He had not crossed continents, endured beatings, betrayals, and humiliation just to stop now. No, he would double down. One more rocket, one more chance. It was the kind of decision that could destroy a man completely, or make him immortal. The burning sky. The sky does not forgive. It does not care about your dreams, your fortune, or your tears. And for Elon Musk, the sky had already swallowed 3 rockets whole. One more failure, and everything was over. The year was 2008. Elon Musk stood on the edge of ruin. In the fluorescent glare of SpaceX's Hawthorne headquarters, the atmosphere was tense, almost funereal. Engineers worked through the night, dark circles under their eyes, fueled by stale coffee and desperation. The Falcon 1 rocket stood ready on the launch pad at Omelek Island in the Pacific. The air heavy with salt and silence. For Elon, this was it. He had poured his last resources into this 4th launch. The money was gone. His credibility was gone. The mocking laughter of skeptics echoed in every headline. Tesla was weeks away from bankruptcy. SpaceX had already failed 3 times. One more failure, and he would be remembered not as a visionary, but as a madman who burned his fortune chasing fantasies. Flashback, the first Falcon 1 launch, March 2006. A fuel leak, fire, failure. The second, March 2007. A control failure. Spinning loss, then silence. The third, August 2008. It reached the skies, the team cheering, only to collide with itself. Explosion. Ash falling over the ocean. 3 times, hope turned to despair. 3 times. The dream of private spaceflight was reduced to twisted metal raining into the sea. Most entrepreneurs would have walked away. Elon doubled down, because for him there was no plan B. Back on Omelek, September 28, 2008, the countdown began. Musk wasn't pacing or shouting. He was still, his face pale, his jaw clenched. Inside, his chest burned. Years of ridicule, betrayal, and exhaustion pressed down on him. Around him, the SpaceX engineers held their breath. They knew this wasn't just another launch. It was survival. T-minus 10, 9, 8. The engines roared to life. Flames licking the air, the sound shaking the tiny island. Falcon 1 lifted from the pad, bright against the Pacific horizon. For minutes, no one spoke. Every second stretched into eternity. Elon's knuckles whitened as he gripped the console. And then history bent. Falcon 1 climbed higher, past the stage separations, past the failures of the past. Higher still, and then, finally, orbit. For the first time in history, a privately funded company had put a liquid-fueled rocket into space. The control room erupted. Engineers who had given up birthdays, marriages, and sleep for this moment collapsed in tears, hugging each other, shouting, shaking with disbelief. Elon lowered his head into his hands, silent. Then, slowly, he smiled. This wasn't just a victory. It was resurrection. But victory came at a cost. Tesla was still on life support, weeks away from death. Elon had bought himself time in space. But on Earth, the wolves were still circling. He would need another miracle, because one rocket in orbit was not enough to save him. Not yet. The world had noticed, but the question remained. Would anyone trust Elon Musk again? The Christmas of empty pockets. There are victories that lift you to stars, and there are defeats that drag you back down to Earth. For Elon Musk, the winner of 2008 was both. He had reached orbit, but he was about to lose everything else. December 2008. Outside, Christmas lights glowed across Los Angeles. Families gathered, fireplaces burned, laughter carried through the night. But inside Elon Musk's home, the air was heavy, suffocating. He had just achieved the impossible. Falcon 1 had reached orbit. SpaceX was alive, if only barely. But Tesla, his other child, his gamble on electric cars, was dying. The Roadster project was bleeding money. Production delays, technical failures, angry customers demanding refunds. Everything was spiraling. Investors had fled. The board whispered about replacing him. Newspapers called Tesla a fraud, a fad, a fantasy. Elon sat at his kitchen table. Papers scattered across the surface. Loan agreements, payroll sheets, red numbers screaming from every page. His fortune from PayPal was gone. He had already poured it all into SpaceX and Tesla. Now he was broke, not metaphorically. Literally, there was no money left for payroll, no money for rent. He had borrowed cash from friends just to survive. He had 5 young sons to support, living between him and his ex-wife. He couldn't even buy Christmas presents. The world saw a billionaire. Behind the curtain, Elon Musk was a man teetering on bankruptcy. On Christmas Eve, the phone rang. It was news that would decide his fate. NASA, after years of humiliation and failure, the U.S. government finally awarded SpaceX a $1.6 billion contract to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. It was salvation, barely in time. SpaceX was alive, but Tesla, still drowning. Elon had one last choice. Let it die or sacrifice the last fragment of his life to keep it alive. He chose the latter. Elon split the NASA money, borrowed more, begged investors to return, and, against all reason, wired his last personal funds into Tesla. On December 24th, 2008, at the very edge of collapse, Tesla survived. It was the closest Elon Musk ever came to losing everything. And he survived not through certainty, not through security, but through sheer reckless will. While the rest of the world opened gifts that Christmas, Elon Musk sat alone, hollow-eyed, staring at the ceiling. He had saved his companies. But in doing so, he had burned himself to ash. Was it worth it? That was a question he couldn't answer yet. Because the truth was, this wasn't the end of the war. It was only the beginning. The contract that saved him. History often turns on moments that seem impossibly small. A phone call, a signature, a decision made in a single room. For Elon Musk, it was one contract, and without it, the story of SpaceX would have ended in silence. It was December 23rd, 2008. Elon Musk sat in his dimly lit office, exhausted beyond measure. The fluorescent lights above flickered. Empty Red Bull cans littered his desk. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken. He had just returned from Tesla headquarters, where he had spent hours trying to convince skeptical investors not to abandon him. Some had already walked away, shaking their heads. Electric cars are a fantasy, Elon. You're chasing ghosts. The clock ticked past midnight. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Outside, Los Angeles was glowing with holiday lights. But Elon's world was darkness. SpaceX was hanging by a thread. Falcon 1's flight had finally succeeded, but one victory wasn't enough. They needed contracts, money, and belief from someone bigger than themselves. Without it, Even the triumph of reaching orbit would fade into nothing. And then the call came. The voice on the other end was from NASA. After years of failure, humiliation, and mockery, they were ready to gamble on Elon Musk. SpaceX had been awarded a $1.6 billion commercial resupply services contract to carry cargo to the International Space Station. Elon froze. For a moment, he didn't even breathe. Then, slowly, the weight crushing his chest began to lift. The room around him blurred as his team erupted in disbelief. Engineers who had been sleeping under desks, working without knowing if their paychecks would clear, began to cry. Some hugged each other. Others collapsed into chairs, shaking. Elon walked outside into the cold December night. He tilted his head back, staring at the stars. For the first time in years, the dream felt real. Humanity was going back to space. And not because of the government giant, but because a group of stubborn engineers refused to quit. But the miracle of NASA's contract didn't solve everything. It bought time, nothing more. Tesla was still gasping for air. Factories unpaid, suppliers furious, cars failing quality checks. Investors wanted out. Elon had to make a choice: save one company or save both. Logic said, save SpaceX. It had NASA now. Let Tesla die. But Elon Musk never played by logic. He split the little money he had left. He begged investors for mercy, cobbled together deals, mortgaged his remaining properties, borrowed money from friends. On Christmas Eve, while millions of families opened gifts under glowing trees, Elon wires last funds into Tesla's account. The company was saved. Barely. That night, Elon returned home with nothing. His bank account was empty. His body was broken. His marriage was over. His reputation was scarred. And yet, he had two living companies, two dreams still breathing. He sat alone in the dark, listening to the faint sound of his children sleeping in the next room. He thought of his father's voice back in South Africa, mocking him, belittling him, telling him he would never be enough. And he whispered to himself, "We will not fail. Not Tesla. Not SpaceX. Not me." From the ashes of that Christmas, Elon Musk was reborn. But rebirth always comes with a price. Because once you survive the impossible, you begin to believe you are unstoppable. And that belief would turn into something more dangerous than bankruptcy. It would become obsession. The obsession. For some men, ambition is a goal. For Elon Musk, it became oxygen. Without it, he could not breathe. And his oxygen was Mars. By 2010, Elon Musk had survived the impossible. Tesla still lived. SpaceX had money in his veins again, thanks to NASA, to the outside world. He was a comeback story, a rare genius who had defied gravity and bankruptcy in the same breath. But inside, something had shifted. Elon was no longer just chasing success. He was chasing destiny. And destiny, in his mind, was spelled with 4 letters, Mars. At meetings, he spoke of it constantly. Investors came to hear about profits, but Elon gave speeches about civilizations, extinction events, and the moral duty of making humanity a multiplanetary species. Some rolled their eyes, others laughed behind closed doors. But when Elon spoke, his eyes burned with such intensity that even skeptics felt a shiver. He wasn't pitching a business. He was declaring a crusade. The obsession came with a cost. His health collapsed under the weight of 100-hour work weeks. He would fall asleep at his desk, sometimes on a factory floor. Meals were skipped, marriages shattered, friendships abandoned. Colleagues whispered, "He's not normal. He doesn't stop. He doesn't know how." One engineer remembered Musk pushing the team until 3 a.m., then returning at 7, demanding more. Another recalled him saying, "I don't care if you miss your child's birthday. We are building the future." To some, he was inspiring. To others, terrifying. The media began calling him the real Iron Man, comparing him to Tony Stark. But Elon wasn't laughing. The comic book comparisons missed the truth. Tony Stark had fiction. Elon Musk had only obsession. And obsession is a dangerous fuel. At home, his relationships fractured. His first marriage to Justine had ended. His second marriage, to actress Tallulah Riley, would collapse, reconcile, and collapse again under the strain of his relentless mission. His children saw him rarely, often through the rearview mirror of a Tesla, as he rushed from one crisis to another. In interviews, he admitted, "My children are the love of my life, but I see them only a little." Still, none of it stopped him. If anything, the sacrifices only hardened his resolve. Mars became his North Star, his obsession, his reason for existing. Every decision, every dollar, every sleepless night pointed in the same direction. Build rockets, build colonies, build an escape route for humanity. Because Elon believed something few dared to say out loud. Humanity was on a clock. Sooner or later, Earth would betray us through climate disaster, nuclear war, or an asteroid. And when that happened, there had to be a plan. His plan. By the mid-2010s, SpaceX was landing rockets upright. Tesla was transforming the auto industry, and Elon Musk was no longer the eccentric millionaire. He was a man many now called savior. But saviors are dangerous, because once you believe you are carrying the weight of humanity, you no longer see limits. And Elon Musk no longer saw limits. From Pretoria to Silicon Valley, from bruises on a playground to rockets in orbit, the boy who had once looked at the stars now demanded to touch them. But the closer he reached, the further he drifted. From friends, from family, from Earth itself. Because Elon Musk was no longer trying to build a company. He was trying to build a legacy. And legacies are carved in obsession. The ticket to Mars. Every dreamer eventually faces the same question. Was it worth the cost? For Elon Musk, the answer was written not in profits or headlines, but in the red dust of a world he may never touch. By the late 2010s, Elon Musk had become more than an entrepreneur. He was a symbol, a lightning rod, a figure loved and hated in equal measure to his supporters. He was a visionary dragging humanity into the future. To his critics, he was a reckless gambler, intoxicated by power and ego. But Elon didn't care. The noise of the world was nothing compared to the voice inside his head, the one that had whispered to him since childhood. Get off this planet. At Tesla, he pushed harder than ever, forcing the company into mass production, sleeping in the factory, refusing to let it collapse under the weight of skeptics. Tesla survived. It thrived. At SpaceX, rockets that once exploded in flames now returned gracefully to Earth, landing on barges in the middle of the ocean, as if mocking gravity itself. The impossible was becoming routine, and yet none of it satisfied him, because for Elon, Tesla was never the goal. SpaceX wasn't even the goal. They were stepping stones, tools, means to a greater end. Mars was the goal. He began to speak of it openly, obsessively. At conferences, he described entire cities rising on the Martian surface. He unveiled the Starship, a rocket larger than any in history, designed not for satellites or space stations, but for carrying human beings to another world. Crowds cheered. Investors gasped. Some scientists smirked. But when Elon Musk spoke of Mars, his voice carried the weight of someone who had already walked its valleys in his dreams. He promised tickets, affordable ones, someday for anyone willing to go. He spoke of children born under alien skies, of humanity becoming a multi-planetary species. It was a sales pitch of the century. But it wasn't money he was selling. It was hope. Hope that it cost. Elon's private life was in ruins. 2 marriages gone. Friendships abandoned. His name became a battlefield online. Every tweet dissected, mocked, or weaponized. He lived surrounded by noise, yet utterly alone. In rare interviews, he admitted the truth. I don't think you'd necessarily want to be me. The nights are long. The pain is heavy. But someone has to do it. Still, he pressed forward. Starship tests lit up the Texas sky. Explosions scattering debris. Critics laughing at each failure. Elon didn't flinch. He remembered Falcon 1, the failures that nearly destroyed him. To him, each explosion was not an ending, but a rehearsal. And slowly, Starship began to rise. By the early 2020s, as Earth burned with political conflict, pandemics, and climate crises, Elon Musk unveiled his ultimate vision, the ticket to Mars. not metaphorical. Real. He promised that one day, sooner than anyone believed, men and women would board his ships and leave Earth behind. The boy who once lay bruised on a playground in South Africa was now offering humanity a way out of its cradle. But here is the paradox. Elon Musk may never walk on Mars himself. His body, worn by decades of obsession, may not survive the journey. His critics say his dream is vanity, a billionaire's escape fantasy. And yet, look closer. For the first time in history, ordinary people believe Mars is not science fiction, but a destination. Children draw rockets in their notebooks again. Engineers sign up for impossible jobs. Nations race to keep up. Elon Musk sold Mars, not to governments, not to corporations, but to humanity. One man's obsession became our collective possibility. And whether he is remembered as a madman or a visionary, one truth will remain. Because of Elon Musk, we can look at the night sky and whisper not someday, but soon. Asterisk, some stories don't end with a victory. They end with a question. Was he a savior or a gambler who risked too much? History will decide. But when the first human steps onto the red soil of Mars, when the dust of another world clings to our boots, we will remember the boy from South Africa who refused to give up. One man was either mad or visionary, and because of him, humanity will never again be trapped on one world. Asterisk,